Voilà. Bonsoir. Alors, on va commencer, on va continuer avec chapitre 6 ce soir. On va faire chapitre 6, partie 3. We're doing 6-3 today, this week, and we'll be continuing with it next week through Thanksgiving. There won't be too much stuff assigned next week. It'll mostly be kind of regrouping time, so that you can enjoy your holiday. And then we'll go on from there. Anyway, yeah, I'm just making sure I have everything on that I'm supposed to have on, and c'est bon, je pense. Voilà. Alors, ça, j'en ai plus besoin. C'est bien. Et puis ça, on va quand même regarder. Voilà. Alors, in this part of the chapter, we're talking about more food stuff. So, of course, I'll be hungry. And a lot of vocabulary about eating out, about things that you need at the table that we haven't necessarily talked about in detail yet, and some things about customs and culture around eating in restaurants and eating at a table. And then we'll continue with a little bit of grammar, of course. Alors, pour la première partie, les arts de la table, il y avait deux, trois choses que j'allais mentionner. There wasn't too much on this page that I wanted to underline. Voilà, c'est assez clair, ce n'est que du vocabulaire. Alors, on va continuer. Alors ici, as usual, you have your vocab list at the end of the chapter that will give you all of the vocab that you need from this section of the chapter. There are just a couple of things that I wanted to mention. I'm pulling up my Evernote so I can make sure to mention the stuff I wanted to mention. Oh yeah. For tips, they talk about the pourboire ici, laisser un pourboire. So leaving a tip or a tip, vous allez avoir. Et c'est bon, on va le rendre plus grand. Alors, un pourboire is a tip. And for the most part, excuse me, here we go with yawning. For the most part, in restaurants and cafes and bars, waiters and waitresses are paid far better than they are here. Here, for the most part, wait staff depends on tips in order to be able to make a living, and they're paid a very nominal amount that's normally less than minimum wage. There's a different minimum wage usually for wait staff than there is for other jobs. However, in France, they are paid very well, and there actually are a lot of people. There are people like this in the States too. It's just that we don't run across that kind of thing as often in little towns like Valdosta or my little town. But if you lived in a big city, you'd have more restaurants where you might go to, and the wait staff is actually there making a living at waiting tables, and that's their career. In France, this happens a lot. So people don't depend on tips to make their living. They're actually paid normal wage, just like any other job. Of course, there are jobs where you make more, there are jobs where you make less, but they're not making minimum wage like we would be making. And partly because of that, and partly just custom, there aren't a lot of tips left. You don't normally leave 15% or 10% or anything like that, or 20% of your check. Normally you leave a little bit of change, and it's just kind of a token to let them know that, yay, you did a good job, thank you. But they don't expect a big tip, and they'll find it a little strange usually if there is a big tip. They're usually, oh, sorry, I gotta turn my phone down. Alors, je l'avais déjà éteint, moi. I thought I had already turned that alarm off. I know I had. Bon. Okay, that should be fine though. Okay. So only on rather large groups there might be a little more expectation for a tip, but usually it's included in the prices of the meal, prices of the food, and very often you just don't leave anything or just leave a little bit of change. And this also goes for taxis, all kinds of other contexts where we might leave it, we might give extra in a tip and they don't necessarily. Now they will often go ahead and give somebody a little bit more, a taxi driver for example, a little bit more than what is due to say keep the change. But for the most part there just isn't as much tipping as there is over here, or as there should be over here. So that's one thing. Another thing is to talk about the l'addition. Et vous avez ici payer chacun sa part, the way that you say to go Dutch, or to split the check. Very often one person will offer to pay for everyone, or if you have just two people at lunch, very often one person will pay that time and the next time the other person will pay. There's a lot of that, and they don't worry too much about whether everybody has spent approximately the same amount of money and all that kind of thing. And especially if they just want to split the check, they will actually split the check. And it doesn't matter if one person got water and the other person got wine or whatever. They just figure it'll equal out at some point. Often, too, somebody will say, "Je t'invite." So this usually means that they are offering you the meal. They're actually inviting you out to eat, and they are going to pay. Alors, je t'invite, je t'offre, etc. So, splitting the check is a big deal in France, and they don't worry too much about the specifics and who got more this time and who got more last time and da 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 da. When I used to take students to France in the summers, this was a big point of contention. Everybody was always worried, you know, so and so had 2 beers, so and so only had 1 coffee, blah blah blah. Just try to not take advantage and spread the love. Next time somebody else will treat, etc. Or next time we'll split it a different way. Alors, voilà, c'est très bien. On va regarder en premier les verbes comme payer. So this isn't really what we're going to do grammar-wise, but they're showing you another stem changer here. These are optional stem changers. Now this is another one of those things, I'm always talking about things that have changed a lot in the 30 or, let me see, how long have I been doing French? About 35 years. In the 30 or 35 years that I've been doing French, these stem changers, these YER stem changers, were not optional when I first learned them. So I have a tendency to go ahead and use the I, the little I that you see the change here for the boot verbs, the boot forms, I mean. Je, tu, il, elle, on, il, elle, pluriel. I will use the I all the time just because that's how I learned it. And I usually try to remember that I don't need to correct everybody when they actually use a Y on these. So if you want to go ahead and use the Y, do. If I accidentally count you wrong on something, then of course let me know. But I'll be using the I all the time just because, you know, that's another interesting way to see how quickly languages change and how quickly things get tweaked in languages, this idea. And there have been other things that we talked about that when I learned them they weren't optional and now they are. So that's kind of interesting what usage makes us do over the years. And you can see languages really are living things, and you'll have changes here and there. Alors, il y a d'autres verbes qui vont marcher comme ça. Ils vous ont donné payer et essayer. They give you payer and essayer. There are some other verbs that work this way. Oh, they're not giving you the others. Off the top of my head, do I remember anymore? Balayer, which is to sweep. In fact, I meant to look for some stem changers on texts or somewhere. Let me quickly see if I can find some on Polarflare or somewhere. Point du flèche, je dirais. So, sorry about this. I meant to look this up beforehand. Alors, okay. Well, usually you can just find it in present tense. We'll see. Alors, they're giving us lots of irregulars. I think there should be some YER exercises here. Maybe not. I cannot remember off the top of my head any others except balayer. Well, if I find any interesting ones to practice this with later... Oh, here we go with some stem changers. Maybe there'll be some more of the... Here we go. Verbe en AYER. So, oh, envoyer. Although envoyer is a non-optional change. Let me see. Essayer, balayer, comme j'ai dit. Délayer, déblayer. You don't need to know any of these others. So really, essayer and payer are the two that you're going to concern yourselves with right now. If you want to play a little bit with balayer, you can. That means to sweep. But these others you do not need to know right now. Délayer, you can figure out that, n'est-ce pas? Alors, voilà. Bon. On va continuer alors en regardant activité A. Alors ici, on va faire que ça soit plus grand. Voilà. Et puis, voilà. Alors, je vais vous lire quelques indices une fois que je les ai trouvés. Voilà. For each... Qu'est-ce qu'on utilise normalement pour manger chaque aliment mentionné? So pick the utensil or the piece of dinnerware or whatever that you would most closely associate with the thing that you hear. D'accord? Alors, numéro 1, vous avez une cuillère, une fourchette, un verre. So pause the video if you need to go back and check and see what these things are before you hear what item you're eating. Numéro 1, alors, une salade. Avec quoi est-ce que vous mangez une salade? Avec une cuillère, une fourchette ou un verre? Une salade. Là, vous utiliserez une fourchette, n'est-ce pas? Vous allez manger la salade avec une fourchette. Numéro 2, un couteau, une fourchette, un bol. N'est-ce pas? Un couteau, une fourchette, un bol. Alors, c'est un steak frites. Avec quoi est-ce que vous mangez un steak frites? Alors moi, je dirais un couteau et une fourchette également. Vous aurez besoin sans doute du couteau pour couper le steak, n'est-ce pas? Et puis la fourchette pour manger après avoir coupé. Mais un couteau et une fourchette peut-être. D'accord? So again, pause if you need to before we come up with the answer. Numéro 3, un gâteau. Vous allez utiliser une tasse, une assiette ou une fourchette pour un gâteau. Alors, je dirais une assiette et une fourchette, n'est-ce pas, pour le gâteau. Numéro 4, un bol, une fourchette, une cuillère. Un bol, une fourchette, une cuillère. Des céréales. Avec quoi est-ce que vous mangez des céréales? Alors, avec un bol et une cuillère, n'est-ce pas? Avec un bol et une cuillère. Numéro 5, alors, vous allez avoir un bol, les doigts ou un couteau. Did they have les doigts in our vocab list? Les doigts, fingers. So, eating with your hands. Un bol, les doigts, un couteau. Alors, numéro 5, des cerises. Des cerises. Alors, vous en mangez avec les doigts, n'est-ce pas? Numéro 6, alors, un verre, une assiette, une fourchette. Un verre, une assiette, une fourchette. Alors, c'est du vin. Comment est-ce que vous allez boire du vin? Avec un verre, n'est-ce pas? Avec un verre. Alors, exercice B. vous allez associer les éléments de la première colonne aux éléments de la deuxième colonne. Et c'est tout, n'est-ce pas? Alors, pour numéro 1, un client. Un client. Moi, je dirais probablement B, n'est-ce pas? Commander. Numéro 2, laisser un pourboire. Laisser un pourboire. Alors, le service n'est pas compris, n'est-ce pas? Le service n'est pas compris, vous allez laisser un pourboire. Payer. Qu'est-ce que vous payez? L'addition, n'est-ce pas? L'addition. Une fourchette et un couteau. Une fourchette et un couteau. Ce sont des couverts, n'est-ce pas? Des couverts. So silverware, when you're putting it on the table, les couverts. Un serveur. Qu'est-ce qu'il va faire le serveur? Il va mettre la table, n'est-ce pas? Mettre la table. Très bien. I forgot to remind you to pause the video, so hopefully you paused the video if you needed to before we came up with the answer. Activité C, c'est un peu comme activité A. Choisissez la bonne réponse pour chaque question ou phrase que vous entendez. D'accord? Vous allez entendre quelque chose que vous entendriez peut-être dans un restaurant, à table ou quoi que ce soit. Et vous allez deviner la réponse ou pardon. Oh là là! Ou la phrase suivante logique. D'accord? Numéro 1 alors. Qu'est-ce que vous voulez prendre? Qu'est-ce que vous voulez prendre? Pardon. Alors vous allez choisir B. Je voudrais le steak frites. Je voudrais le steak frites. Numéro 2. Avec des légumes ou le service est compris. J'ai oublié de lire les deux choix dans le premier, n'est-ce pas? Pour le numéro 2, avec des légumes ou le service est compris. Alors, numéro 2, c'est servi avec quoi? C'est servi avec quoi? You have a big hint with these, right? Avec quoi? Avec des légumes, n'est-ce pas? Numéro 3, so again, pause the video if you need to. Non merci, c'est tout. Ou à table. Numéro 3, autre chose? Non merci, c'est tout. C'est pas? C'est ce que le serveur va vous demander. Autre chose, madame? Quoi que ce soit. Numéro 4, alors. Bon appétit? Oui, merci. Numéro 4. C'est à votre goût? Oui, merci, n'est-ce pas? C'est à votre goût, c'est un peu comme oh, is it pretty good? Do you like it? C'est à votre goût. Literally, is it to your taste, n'est-ce pas? Numéro 5. Je voudrais une omelette en liquide. Je voudrais une omelette en liquide. Numéro 5 alors. Vous payez comment? En liquide, n'est-ce pas? So cash. Numéro 6. Oui au nom de Tremblay. Oui au nom de Tremblay. Mais pour moi, un verre d'eau. Pour moi, un verre d'eau. Et la question, avez-vous une réservation? Avez-vous une réservation? Oui au nom de Tremblay, n'est-ce pas? Numéro 7 alors? Attendez. There we go. Numéro 7 alors, une tarte s'il vous plaît ou un café s'il vous plaît. Une tarte s'il vous plaît, un café s'il vous plaît. Quelque chose à boire? Un café s'il vous plaît, n'est-ce pas? Numéro 8, bon appétit. On paie chacun sa part. Bon appétit. On paie chacun sa part. Alors, numéro 8, à table. Bon appétit, n'est-ce pas? C'est très bien. Alors, à table, moi, je dirais qu'on n'entendrait pas ça tellement dans un restaurant. Normally, à table is something you would say at home. Like, everybody, okay, we're ready to eat, or let's eat, or everybody sit down, or whatever you say. À table. Whereas in a restaurant, you don't normally say that because usually everybody's at the table already. And then you're ready to just eat. Alors, bon appétit. Alors, c'est très bien. On va sauter alors maintenant à garder un peu de grammaire. Et voilà. Très bien. So, everything that we've done recently, I had some things for you to review before we dug in on these. Like when we were talking about passé composé, and I said go back and review avoir or review être or whatever. With these particular things, the pronom complément d'objet direct, there's not too much that you've done already that is going to, wet the ground for direct object pronouns. However, it is important for you to recognize number and gender on things that we're talking about. So it will be pretty important to know your vocab and also to know a lot of your vocab well enough to know whether it's masculine or feminine. You need also to be able to look at something and tell whether it's plural or not. And you need to a certain extent be able to tell when you're reading a sentence what the relationships are between the things and people that are being discussed in the sentence, so that if you need to, you can restate them a little differently. And that's basically what we're doing with direct object pronouns, is we are restating things that are already being stated, and we're making things a little more succinct. As you go on in French, more and more and more of the stuff that we do will be about this. It will be about making things more succinct, making your language more streamlined. If you think about it, when you have a conversation in your native language, we don't repeat everything all the time the way that you do in some of your grammar activities and things, right? You usually go ahead and use pronouns to shorten things a little bit, because language, our instinct is to make our language, to make our communication between ourselves and other people as efficient as possible. And if we're continually repeating things, then obviously that's not very efficient. But if I say something like, oh, did you give the ball to Joe? And you say, yeah, I gave it to him. That's making it more succinct right away. I'm not necessarily going to say, yes, I gave the ball to Joe. Oh, what time did you give the ball to Joe? I gave the ball to Joe at 3 o'clock. Oh, did you have fun giving the ball to Joe? Whatever. Where you're constantly repeating. Our tendency in all languages is to make things more succinct, more streamlined, and make our language more efficient so that we don't have to spend time repeating things all the time. And that's what object pronouns are going to help you do. They're going to help you streamline your language so that you're not constantly repeating things all the time, but so that the things that need to be referred to in order for the sentence to make sense are still there in some way. And that's what we're doing. So that example I just used is a very good one. If I say, attendez, alors, right? So the ball is my direct object. We talked a little bit about direct objects recently, where we said the thing that is being most directly influenced by the verb, most directly affected by the verb. So if I want to change this to a direct object pronoun in English, I'm just going to say get. I'm going to just say it, right? Right? Voila. And we can have people as direct objects. Right? Now he's a direct object. So basically that's, voila. So there's two examples right there, and that's basically what we're going to be doing in French, is using direct objects. They can be people or things, and we're simply replacing them when we answer or refer to those things or people the second time and subsequent times in order to make our language more streamlined, more efficient, more succinct, etc., etc., etc. So it's going to work very similarly to this. Alors, on y va, on va regarder. Oh, attendez, j'ai oublié de faire la présentation. Voila. So, direct object pronouns allow you to substitute pronouns for direct object nouns. Basically, we're just replacing things, as I said, people, things, and as they say here, places, situations, etc. We're replacing the original way to refer to those things or people and coming up with a shorter way to refer to them so that we can streamline our language and make it more efficient as we continue in our conversation and we don't have to keep repeating things all the time. So here's some examples. J'aime ces biscuits. Je les achète. Okay? I like these cookies. I'm buying them. Je les achète. So look at what's happening. J'aime ces biscuits. We know that we're referring to cookies, right? Then I'm putting in a pronoun. I don't have to keep using biscuit. I'm just going to put a pronoun in now. Je les achète. And look where the pronoun is going. Directly in front of your conjugated verb. D'accord? Il adore le musée. On le visite aujourd'hui. Same thing. Le musée. I'm going to refer to it again, but I don't want to keep saying musée, 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 so I'm using a pronoun. On le visite aujourd'hui. Again, right in front of the conjugated verb. D'accord? Il a une sœur, il la garde aujourd'hui. Same thing. I'm referring to my sister or his sister, and we don't want to keep having to repeat these words all the time, so we're making it a little more succinct. Il la garde aujourd'hui. Okay? And again, it's directly in front of the conjugated verb. Now, I'm going to keep saying that way because, in my humble opinion, that is the easiest way for you to remember where to put these. In a moment, you're going to see one of the slides is going to word things a little bit differently, similarly to how they worded something about placement a few lessons ago. And I said, be careful thinking about it that way. So I'm going to say that again in a few minutes. So be ready. Alors, encore des exemples. Ou bien, j'ai les pronoms eux-mêmes, n'est-ce pas? So the actual pronouns that we're going to be using, if you're talking about me, je, as a direct object, me, d'accord? Pardon. If you're talking about us as a direct object, nous. If you're talking about you, then you have two choices, just like you always do, tu or vous. If it's tu, you're going to have te, and they're doing the apostrophe thing to show you what's going to happen in front of a vowel, right? This should be automatic by now, this whole apostrophe thing. And vous, d'accord? If I'm talking about third person singular or a thing, or third person plural, or things plural, then I can use the same thing whether it's people or not. Le, la, and of course in front of a vowel, both of those are going to change to your apostrophe, and les. And this again could be people or things. Okay? Now these are probably not going to be things. Me, te, nous, vous are going to be people, right? But le, la, and les could just as easily be things as people. And here is where I'm really going to watch to see about gender. If I'm talking about something feminine or someone feminine versus something masculine versus something plural, I only have one option for plural, so that's a little easier. But be careful between le and la, right? And again, in front of a vowel, I'm not really going to be able to tell. I've got to drop my vowel and use an apostrophe, just like we almost always do when we have vowels coming up. So don't forget, by now, everybody's antenna should be finely tuned for vowels that are coming up. And if there's a vowel coming up, you should automatically know, uh-oh, I'm probably going to have to do something special here. And more often than not, we put in some kind of an apostrophe treatment. So, direct objects before a conjugated verb, as I said, directly in front of the conjugated verb. And so this is okay, but I want you guys to tell yourselves directly before the conjugated verb, okay? Because when we look at negatives in a minute, that's going to make all the difference, okay? Direct object pronouns go directly before the conjugated verb. Do I need to write that? I don't think I will. Just don't forget, direct object pronouns go, what? Directly before the conjugated verb. Okay, that way when I have a negative or something, I know what to do. And we will look at an example for that in a moment. Alors, des exemples, nous vous entendons, we hear you, in front, directly in front of the conjugated verb, right? Est-ce que tu m'aimes? Directly in front of the conjugated verb. Je t'aime beaucoup. Again, directly in front of what? The conjugated verb. Je l'aime bien. Oh, I like it. Directly in front of the conjugated verb. You getting that? Directly in front of the conjugated verb. So here is why I want you to say that way. I don't want you to think ne pas goes around the direct object pronoun and the conjugated verb. What I want you to think is, and now we really are going to look at some examples. New one. Oh, then I have to worry about making it bigger and everything again already. So there we go. Des exemples. Alors comme j'ai dit, je sais pas, par exemple. Let's do it a little more naturally. D'accord? Tous les soirs. D'accord? So la télé, my direct object, right? And here's my pronoun, third person singular, directly in front of the conjugated verb, right? Now what's going to happen is as soon as I have this pronoun in front of the conjugated verb, this whole thing is going to be treated as my verb now. D'accord? So we're going to do this. Okay? This whole thing is going to be treated as my verb now. Everything we ever do to the verb from now on, using this sentence or using this expression, I'm going to do to this whole unit. You're going to pretend like the pronoun is part of the verb. Okay? So if I have a negative, I'm going to put the negative around everything, around this whole thing. Basically what we're saying is that this pronoun is a little bit more important, meaning-wise, than a negative or anything else I might be doing. It's almost as important as the verb. It's going to go with the verb and it's going to stay there forever. So here's a good example. Quand est-ce que tu regardes la télé? Ben, oh, I don't watch TV. Je ne la regarde pas. And look what's happening. Oh, pardon. This is staying as a unit, right? Ne pas that I would normally just put around my verb, now I'm putting it around the whole thing. So as soon as I put a pronoun directly in front of my conjugated verb, I'm going to treat this whole thing as a unit, and anything I would normally just do to the verb, I'm now going to do to this whole unit. Okay? Pretend that this is married or something now. It can't ever be separated. D'accord? Encore un exemple. Oui, je l'ai vu. D'accord? So, Pierre. Oh, qu'est-ce que je fais? Oh, voilà. Voilà. Tu as vu Pierre? Oui, je l'ai vu. Oui. And this is my unit now. Oh, pardon. Voilà. So, now this whole thing is my verb, right? I've put my pronoun directly in front of the conjugated verb. Normally it would be le, but since it's in front of a vowel, I'm dropping and putting my apostrophe. And if I have to do the negative, d'accord? Now I'm treating this whole thing, as we said, as my conjugated verb, and ne pas is going around the entire thing. And then look at what's happening, just like we did when we did passé composé without any pronouns, right? You had ne pas around the conjugated verb, you still are going to do that, and your past participle is still sticking out here somewhere, right? So, as soon as I put my pronoun directly in front of the conjugated verb, now I treat this whole thing as a unit, as I said. Same thing down here, treating this whole thing as a unit. Anything I would normally do just to the verb, I'm now going to do to this whole unit. Okay? Now this is a little bit different way of wording what they're going to go ahead and explain to you in a moment. But I strongly recommend thinking about it this way. It will help streamline things for you as we get into other tenses and what to do with your pronouns in the other tenses as well. Okay? Alors, ne pas goes around the direct object pronoun and the conjugated verb, which is what we just did basically. Here's some examples. Tu sors avec Luc? Non, je ne l'aime pas. So look what's happening. My le is going directly in front of my conjugated verb. And now my ne pas goes around the whole thing. We're treating this as an entity, as a single thing, right? Ces livres, non, elle ne les lit pas. My pronoun's going directly in front of my conjugated verb. Now I'm treating this whole thing as a unit if I have a negative or whatever. So ne pas around the whole thing, okay? When an infinitive follows a conjugated verb, the direct object pronoun goes before the infinitive. Now I'm going to turn these rules around a little bit on you. Here's what's really happening. I kind of want to leave that there. Okay. This is what we're going to do. Basically, when you are figuring out your placement, actually we will start a new one. Voila. So, placement. Okay, now this is going to work for indirect object pronouns too, but for now we're just focusing on the directs. But next semester when you get into the indirects, the same thing is going to happen. There will be a few little differences between using directs and indirects, but your placement will work exactly the same way. So the first thing you look for is an infinitive. D'accord? If there's an infinitive, d'accord? Directly in front of the infinitive. So some examples of this. Par exemple, oh, on va faire ça. Je vais les faire bientôt. D'accord? So look what's happening. I'm not going for the conjugated verb because I have an infinitive in my sentence. And I'm putting this directly in front of my infinitive. D'accord? Je vais les faire bientôt. Anything else that might be happening, if it's negative or whatever, it doesn't matter. These are going to stay. This is going to stay with the infinitive. So let's look at a negative and we'll see. Alors, par exemple, oh la la, I've never done one of those before. There we go. Okay. Non, on ne va pas la regarder. D'accord? So, look at what's happening. On ne va pas. I want to put this down a line actually so that you could see it better. Voilà. Non, on ne va pas la regarder. My la, my direct object pronoun, is still going with the infinitive. And I've got negative up here, but it doesn't matter. I'm just doing my negative like I normally would do, and it doesn't have any effect on this, because now my infinitive is la regarder, les faire. So just like what I just said a minute ago, how you're going to leave this in front of the conjugated verb, and now that's a unit, the same idea comes into play here. I'm going to put these with the infinitive if there is one, and now that is a unit. Okay? Everything else that happens in the sentence, go away. Doesn't have any effect on this stuff. Okay? So, oh, je savais, je m'en doutais. Voilà. Okay, the second thing you do is look and see if it's command form. Okay? Now this part we don't need to know quite yet, but I want to include it because eventually when you're doing all these, you will want this step included. So for now, you don't have to worry about it. D'accord? I'm still going to show you some examples. So for example, d'accord? So look at what's happening with this one. I'm putting it right after my verb, And I'm linking the two with a hyphen. This is kind of wacky, right? But that's how we do it. Okay? Voilà. D'accord? And actually, this is only with affirmative commands, so I'm gonna do this. That makes it even simpler. Okay, c'est très bien. So your third choice then is if there's not an infinitive and it's not an affirmative command, and basically what happens is oh, d'accord? So some examples for this. I don't know why I keep having to talk about Pierre ce soir. Pierre with our lesson this time, but oh well. Oh là là. D'accord? And if we want negative, what's going to happen? Right? Because we had le voir as our unit. Oui. And the same thing's going to happen. If I have a negative or something, I'm going to put it around the whole thing, as we said before. Okay? Encore un exemple. Voilà. D'accord? So look at what's happening. I'm putting it in front of my conjugated verb still. And it's staying a unit, even though I'm putting negative around. Okay? Voilà. So you're going to see lots more of these in practice. But, and I was trying to get this to fit. I think I'm just going to have to make it a little smaller for you. Alors, voilà. D'accord? So here is my more or less most succinct way of looking at placement for direct object pronouns. And as I said, the same exact thing is going to come into play when we look at indirect object pronouns. The same placement works for those as well. And I'll tell you something else. In a little while, we're going to be doing these with passé composé, because we just did passé composé, so we're going to go ahead and do them with passé composé. And the same exact placement rules are going to work for every single tense we ever do. It's not very often that we can tell you guys that something works exactly like this forever, but it really does. Look for an infinitive. The infinitive is the wild card, right? If you have an infinitive, you have to do something slightly different. If you have an affirmative command, you have to do something slightly different. Every other way of using verbs, you're simply going to put it directly in front of the conjugated verb, no matter what. So you guys know already if it's passé composé, avoir or être is going to be my conjugated verb, right? Unlike when we're talking about present tense, then our principal verb, voir, for example, is our conjugated verb, right? So keep thinking directly in front of the conjugated verb, and once you put them there, treat those two things as a single unit. Okay? Voilà. Alors, on va continuer avec le PowerPoint. So here's some more examples. Les livres, Nicole va les acheter. Because we have an infinitive, it's going directly in front of the infinitive. Now if we're going to make negative with this, we would put ne and pas around your conjugated verb, and none of this gets affected, right? La télévision, j'aime la regarder. Same thing. It's going with my infinitive. J'aime te regarder danser. D'accord? In front of the infinitive. Son vélo, il ne va pas le vendre. Le vendre, and look at what's happening with the negative. Negative is going around the conjugated verb. I don't have to do anything special with my negative just because there's a pronoun here. My pronoun is staying with my infinitive no matter what. Alors, pour le passé composé, there's one more interesting thing. And you can read this. I'm not going to read it because basically they're restating what I told you, but I think in a more complicated way. So again, you know me, I'm all for you guys using what is going to be the clearest thing for you guys to use. So if you really like how they've explained this, it doesn't pose any problems for you, then yay, go for it. But I think that most of you are going to fare a little bit better if you keep track of my little placement system here, okay? And when you're talking about passé composé, the same thing is going to happen. Tu as mis la fourchette sur la serviette. So we said, if there's no infinitive, there's no affirmative command, it's going directly in front of the conjugated verb. That's my default, right? So look at what's happening. Je l'ai mise sur la serviette. It's going directly in front of the conjugated verb. And the conjugated verb now is avoir. Okay? So that's how this is never, ever, ever going to fail you. Now there's one other thing, is that when you have a direct object pronoun in passé composé with avoir, you need to make agreement on your past participle. D'accord? Now, instead of like with être passé composé when we made agreement with the subject, we're actually making agreement with whatever we're talking about in our direct object. Okay? So let's look at one more example. Okay. D'accord? So example. Oh là là! D'accord? Je les ai faits. I'm adding my S because of devoir. And in this case, I need to know whether devoir is masculine or feminine because I might need a different kind of ending, right? So we'll look at one of those too. Oh, qu'est-ce que je fais? Fallait pas que ça soit surligné. Voilà. D'accord? Ils les ont mangés. Crêpe is feminine. So now I'm making agreement feminine plural because of my pronoun being in front of my conjugated verb here. Now if it were negative or whatever, it would be the same exact thing. I'm still going to make agreement. D'accord? So it doesn't make any difference. So again, notez bien, in passé composé, when you use the direct object pronoun, make agreement on your past participle. D'accord? For the direct object pronoun. Remember when we did être passé composé and we made agreement, we were making agreement with the subject, right? Now we're not doing that. We're making agreement with the direct object. So you need to keep in mind what is this les referring to, and you need to be able to know when you see a lot of your different vocab words, is something masculine or feminine. Okay? Alors, même chose si c'était pour quelque chose de singulier. If it were a singular thing, the same thing would happen. Qu'est-ce que je fais? Tu as aimé le... Oh là là. I can't think of a feminine... I'm trying to think of a feminine food. All of a sudden I'm blanking. Oh, tu as aimé la soupe? Voilà. Tu as aimé la soupe? Oui, je l'ai adoré. D'accord? And again, la soupe. I'm keeping that in mind for my le here, which is really a la, my L apostrophe. And I'm making agreement because feminine singular. D'accord? Now these are another one of those things that if you're talking to somebody in Paris and you don't make agreement on your past participle, 99% of the time they won't be able to tell. Well, maybe not 99% of the time, but a large percentage of the time they won't be able to tell. And it won't block comprehension even if they can tell. Okay? Normally it doesn't do anything with comprehension. It's not going to make people wonder, wait a minute, which thing was she referring to? Their head is going to figure it out from context for the most part. But again, we need to pay attention to it because we are trying to learn languages the best we can, and we're trying to pay attention to all the rules that we need to pay attention to. So let's look at a couple more examples, a couple more activities. Alors, moi j'ai beaucoup aimé exercice J, activité J. Attendez. Bon, beaucoup aimé, je sais pas si j'ai beaucoup aimé, mais je l'ai aimé bien, quoi. Alors. Oh, regarde! Ça, c'est une couscoussière. Oh my goodness. That is making me so incredibly hungry. Alors. I forgot to put the page number for this activity. Voilà, c'est très bien. So this activity is showing us these things a little bit backwards. This is basically they're showing you the pronoun and you have to figure out what word might be able to be represented by that pronoun. That's a really weird way to say that. Anyway, you'll see what I mean. Stéphanie, la cousine d'Abia, déménage et elle vend des choses sur eBay. Pardon. Oh my goodness. I haven't been yawning quite as much as normal. Regardez les pronoms pour déterminer les choses qu'elle vend. D'accord? So, elle le vend, son lit. So, look at what's happening. Elle le vend. Look how this is masculine singular. So, it's very logical that it might be her bed. D'accord? Vous voulez que ça soit plus grand? Ouais, n'est-ce pas? Can I drag that? Oh, I remember. Voilà, c'est très bien. C'est assez grand comme ça? Attendez, on va faire que ça soit plus grand même. Voilà. Alors, numéro 1, elle la vend. So figure out which item is going to be the thing that could be represented with la. Son téléviseur LCD, sa table, ses rideaux. Bien sûr, sa table, n'est-ce pas? So pause the video if you need to before we come up with the answer because, again, we're running out of time like we always do. So we're going to speed up a little bit. Numéro 2, elle les vend. Alors, ses livres, sa poêle, sa lampe. Bien sûr, ses livres, n'est-ce pas? C'est masculin, je veux dire, c'est pluriel et c'est le seul choix qui soit pluriel. Numéro 3, elle le vend. Son ordinateur, pardon, sa poubelle, ses tapis. Son ordinateur, n'est-ce pas? C'est le seul qui soit masculin singulier. Numéro 4, elle les vend. Sa table, sa console, oui. Ses assiettes, sorry. We's always make me laugh. Did I tell you that joke? I think I told you that joke a couple sessions ago. When the Wii's first came out and everybody said, oh, you know what it's called in French is yes. When you buy a Wii in France, it's called a yes. Alors, okay, you have to be a language nerd. I'll probably say that joke again, because whenever they talk about Wii's in here, I think about that. Alors, toute façon, elle les vend. Sa table, sa console, oui, ou ses assiettes. Ses assiettes, n'est-ce pas? C'est pluriel, alors il faut que ça soit les assiettes. Numéro 5, elle le vend. Son micro-ondes, ses verres à vin, sa chaise. So even if the spelling on micro-ondes freaks you out a little bit, look at the possessive adjective. That's telling you the gender and number right there. Son micro-ondes, n'est-ce pas? Masculine singular, son micro-ondes. Micro-ondes avec ES, avec S, because it's plural microwaves, even though it's just a singular oven, right? So, I don't think we talked about that when we were looking at those originally, but. Numéro 6, elle la vend. Son frigo, sa maison, ses affiches. Elle va vendre sa maison sur eBay, c'est ça? Oh là là. You can't sell it. Can you sell a house on eBay? It doesn't seem like a very good thing to do to me. Oh well. Elle la vend, son frigo, sa maison, ses affiches. Bien sûr, c'est la maison, n'est-ce pas? Voilà. Oh, fallait pas que ça soit, que je bouge ça. Attendez. Voilà. Il y avait un autre. Alors, pour exercice K, c'est ça qu'on allait faire? Oui. Pour l'activité K, c'est un peu la même chose, except we're kind of doing the opposite. We're also looking at agreement. Utiliser les participes passés pour déterminer ce que Robert Levesque a acheté. Okay? So, a lot of them are going to be where both, that is almost all of them now that I'm looking at them quickly, they're all going to be cases where the pronoun itself could work for either one, right? But we have to look at the agreement to figure out which thing we're referring to really, okay? Numéro 1, comme exemple, il l'a acheté. So look at il l'a acheté, la glace goût d'humeur, ou le yaourt Yoplait. Okay, so L apostrophe could be either one of these things, right? We don't know, but look at what's happening with acheter. If this were feminine, we would need an extra E. Since it's not, since there isn't an extra E, we can assume it's masculine singular. Le yaourt Yoplait. Okay? Numéro 2, il l'a acheté. De l'eau minérale Evian ou le punch Kool-Aid, qui n'existe pas en France d'ailleurs, mais voilà. Je ne sais pas si ça existe au Canada ou non, mais en France, ça n'existe pas. Hein. Alors, l'eau minérale Evian, bien sûr, parce que ça, c'est féminin. Féminin. OK? Numéro 3, il l'a acheté. Alors, la moutarde maille, le ketchup Walmart. La moutarde maille, bien sûr, parce que vous avez le E, alors il faut que ça soit féminin singulier. It has to be feminine singular or we wouldn't have this E. Therefore, la moutarde maille. Okay? Numéro 4, il les a achetés. So again, pause the video if you need to because we're going faster and faster and faster. Il les a achetés, les pâtes fraîches ou les macaronis au fromage Kraft. Qui n'existe pas en France, mais voilà. Faut que je mentionne ça à chaque fois. Alors, I don't know why they do that. I guess maybe there is, some of this stuff probably is in Canada, but that's just kind of wacky. Anyway, les pâtes fraîches, n'est-ce pas? Parce que c'est féminin pluriel, and we have our ES, our ES here, so it has to be feminine plural. Numéro 5, il l'a acheté. Alors, la crème à 35% ou le lait à 2%? Bien sûr, c'est le lait. OK? Il n'y a pas d'accord. There's no agreement. So it has to be masculine singular. Il les a achetés. Les fruits biologiques, les pizzas surgelées. Regarde ça. C'est pluriel, mais c'est masculin ou féminin? C'est masculin, alors les fruits bio. OK? And how do I know? I've got a big clue here, right? Les fruits masculine. If you didn't remember, then you've got a clue here. But this is a good example of where a lot of your vocab that you've had already, it's not going to be quite enough anymore to just be able to recognize it. You really need to know if those things are masculine or feminine, etc. Okay? Numéro 7, il les a achetés, ES, les fromages philadelphiens ou les fraises natural choice. Alors, les fraises, n'est-ce pas? Les fraises, c'est féminin, tandis que les fromages, masculin. Il a acheté les hamburgers de McDo ou le poulet rôti de Saint-Hubert. Le poulet rôti, n'est-ce pas? Puisque c'est singulier. So this one, they're being easy on you. They're not making you decide because of the gender. They're making you decide because of masculine, plural or singular. So that's a lot easier. Les hamburgers, bien sûr, on aurait il les a achetés, tandis que le poulet rôti, il l'a acheté. Numéro 9, il a acheté la glace au lait de soja ou les pizzas de Tim Hortons. N'est-ce pas? La glace au lait de soja, puisque c'est féminin. D'accord? Il les a achetés, les bières Budweiser, les jus bio. Boum. Il les a achetés, les jus bio. N'est-ce pas? Les bières, c'est féminin, tandis que les jus, masculin. D'accord? Voilà. C'est très bien. I did have a couple of activities that I wanted us to look at. What I will do is post them on the module. A couple of placement activities, because you're going to want to practice the placement more before you go on to these agreement things. Okay, so this one wasn't really about the agreement. It's a little bit about the agreement. It's about choosing the right pronoun. But as for these passé composé ones, really work on the present tense ones a little bit first, and then go on to this stuff. Okay, and above all, remember your placement. Look for an infinitive first. If there's an infinitive, etc., etc. Second choice, if there's an affirmative command, and they didn't have us doing any of those. However, you will need to know those a little ways down the road. So it's good to have them here already rather than having to relearn these rules once that comes up, right? And then all other cases directly in front of the conjugated verb, no matter what. You know what? I do want to look at one more example about that, because for example, this is what I was talking about the difference between the principal verb or the conjugated verb, right? So if I say something like, attendez. Oh, attendez. D'accord? So we're putting it in front of the conjugated verb, directly in front of the conjugated verb, like we did before, right? And look at what's happening. It's in front of the principal verb, right? There's only one verb, but still, it is the principal verb. Now, if I change this to passé composé, finir is still my principal verb. D'accord? Finir is still my principal verb, but it's not my conjugated verb anymore. So that's why this is so important to remember directly in front of the conjugated verb, because now what happens with passé composé, oh, d'accord? Elle les a finis, and it's going in front of my conjugated verb just like it did before, but now avoir is my conjugated verb, not finir. Finir is still the most important verb meaning-wise. Avoir is just tweaking it, like I said last chapter when we were first talking about passé composé with avoir. But nonetheless, avoir is my conjugated verb now, so my pronoun's going to go in a slightly different place. D'accord? And then, as we said, we're going to keep this together if we needed to do negative or anything like that. We're going to do it around the whole thing, right? Because this is a unit now. Okay? So I just wanted to point that out, that if you follow these rules, once in a while it's going to seem like you're doing it wrong, right? You get down to a passé composé and you go, oh, wait a minute. Well, that's weird. Why would it be with avoir now? It's with avoir because it's supposed to be with avoir. It's because you're doing it correctly, okay? So don't be surprised if that happens. That's the way it's supposed to look. It's going to move around from verb to verb because sometimes this verb's conjugated, sometimes this verb's conjugated. And as I said, that is going to hold true no matter what tense we're in, as long as you've eliminated these first two possibilities. Okay? No infinitive, no affirmative command, then you're going to depend on this for every other case. Okay? And this is going to happen, this is going to be something you can depend on for the rest of your French career. Do a million different tenses, not that many exist, thank goodness. But every single other place except for these first two cases, this, putting it directly in front of the conjugated verb, would be the right thing to do. So you're always going to be able to depend on that. C'est très bien. Alors, je mettrai aussi, I'll try to remember too to put these rules on the module. I usually prefer that you get that stuff from the video, but after everybody's had a chance to watch the video, if somebody will shoot me an email, I will post them on the module as well so that you can go look at it there. Or who knows, I might make a PowerPoint or something. You never know. So I will give you this stuff though. So, but you have it here. So you can always do some screen caps or something in the video to keep track of these rules also. Alors, c'est très bien. On va s'arrêter là. Et as I said, next week we will simply continue with this stuff. We'll practice this stuff a whole bunch more. I want you to be able to enjoy your holiday. So I'll simply post some practice links and probably do kind of a review class. And I also want to do a review class of whatever you guys want to look at again as the final approaches. So if anybody has anything particular they want to review in a review class, let me know. And I'd be happy to do an extra session based on some things that you guys want to look at more specifically again. But at any rate, we will continue working on these as well, and I will post some of the outside site activities for you to be able to practice this stuff some more that way too. Also, of course, your iLearn is all set up for you to go practice these, and you've got textbook activities that we have yet to hit that you can work with as well. Alors, c'est très bien. I'm going to dig in on grading compositions, hot and heavy tonight, so hopefully you'll have those waiting for you in your email in the morning. And voilà, onward and upward. Alors, bonne continuation, bon weekend. Oh, I'll also have the quiz posted tonight, so you can go take that whenever you'd like as well. Et voilà, alors bonne soirée. Et je vous verrai bientôt, ou bien, je veux dire, numériquement, quoi, digitally, we'll see each other. Alors, très bien, bonne soirée, salut, au revoir.
Recording stopped.